Hello all, welcome to this respective session. Um, yeah, let's start without any delays. Give me a minute. Yes, yeah. So hello all, welcome back to the session. So in this session, we'll see the different concepts that are present inside the JavaScript. So before that, let's have a small recap of what are the things that we have understood from the previous session and what are the things that we have covered in the previous session. And also let's try to understand how can we utilize, how can we learn a new thing in JavaScript in today's session altogether. So the recap part is in the previous session we have learned about switch statement. We have seen about function declarations and parameters. We have seen local versus outer variables and returning values. We have seen about all of these respective things in the previous session. Now coming back to this session, we'll focus upon function expressions, callback functions, arrow functions, objects. And if time allows us, we'll try to complete this entire objects in this session, or we'll have this objects in the next session altogether. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and let's try to understand this function expressions altogether. So let me go to this thing. Let me open my VS Code. Wait. So for it, let me create a new file known as function expression.js. This function expression.js. So in JavaScript, a function is not a magical language structure. Function is not a magical language structure. Wait a minute. Yeah. Yes, everything is fine. Everything is fine. Yes. Just let's go ahead. Do it. Right. So one very important thing we need to understand for this aspect of thing is the syntax that we used before in the previous sessions is called function declaration. Is called function declaration part. Now coming back to this given particular thing, sorry. So the function declaration would actually look like this, which is nothing but we have this function keyword, we have this something known as say hi or something else, and we'll have our code or our function body. More pieces, let me say console.log hi. This is the thing that we actually have, but we have to understand that there is another type of yeah, there is another type of um, syntax in JavaScript which allows us to create a new function in the middle of any expression. So the example would, let's take the same above example. So I'll say function expression. I'll simply mention it as, I'll say let say hi is equal to function, and I'll say console.log of hi. This is how we actually can write the same function. So I can, instead of writing this as a comment, uh, not now, give me a minute. Right. The below code that we are actually seeing is the same thing. We can actually make a call to it. So previously in the previous code, if you can clearly see, we have created a function declaration kind of a thing, and we have called our function declaration. So instead of creating a function in the format of function declaration altogether, what we can do is we can go ahead and we can actually create a function expression like this, a new way of creating this thing, where here in this given particular example, this entire function is now stored inside a variable name as say hi. This entire function is stored inside a variable known as say hi. Say hi. If you go ahead a bit and let's try to say console.log type of, I think, say hi. if you go ahead and do this thing, let me say, okay, this is new file, function xp.js. You can clearly see this console log output is nothing but the function. And as whenever we made a call to this respective function known as say hi variable, where the say hi variable is storing a function, then we got this output as hi. We get this output as hi. This is how these two things actually work. And another interesting thing is you can clearly observe when functions are being stored inside a given particular variable, as we know, the type of is one such a operator where it helps us to find out what data type is stored inside a given particular variable. Similarly here, this say hi variable is storing a data type known as function, a data type known as function. Now if you can clearly observe, if you clearly observe this syntax compared to this previous syntax, here we have a function keyword and we have a function name. We have a function name and we have the parentheses and parameters altogether. But if you can clearly observe this function name, this say hi function name in the function declaration is kept as a variable name here, is kept as a variable name here. And this function that we are actually seeing is kind of an anonymous function. What is an anonymous function? Anonymous function is nothing but is where the function doesn't have any name. The function doesn't have any kind of a name. But this anonymous function is stored inside a given particular variable, so that if you want to call this anonymous function, we use the same respective variable to execute this entire function, to execute this function. So another interesting point I just want to mention is the name it suggests itself, it's a function expression altogether. Here we can see the variable say hi getting a value, the new function created by this given particular syntax. Now, as function creation happens in the context of assignment expression, is nothing but assignment expression is nothing but equal to assignment operator. Assignment expression. This is a function expression. The name why it got the function expression is this. Why it got the function expression is this. Because we are using this assignment operator where we are creating a function and we are storing inside a given particular variable using this assignment operator. That's why we have this given particular thing. And if you can clearly observe this one single thing, there is no name after this function keyword, right? This is a mandatory thing that when we are creating any kind of function expressions, we do this thing. Once after function keyword, we don't mention the function name itself. Here, we immediately assign it this anonymous function to a simple variable, meaning that of these code samples, I create a function and put it inside a variable named as say hi. In more advanced situations that we'll come across later, a function may be created and I can say immediately called or scheduled for a later execution, not stored anywhere, thus remaining anonymous until this given particular thing has been created and stored inside a variable. Until we call this given particular function, the JavaScript or this entire thing is kept as anonymity. So this is a way of doing a function expression, which is nothing but this. Let me do it. Right. Similarly, we have an thing known as function is a value. Let's iterate this one very important thing, that no matter I can say, let me write it here. No matter how the function is created, a function is always a value. Function is a value. So both the examples that we have seen, the say hi function, this example and this example, store a function. Let me write it. Both the values or both the examples above store a function in the say hi variable. say hi variable. Similarly, if you undo this function, if I could copy it, if I could copy it, let's remove these unnecessary symbols. So if I say something like console.log, say hi, me keep this in comment. Now you can clearly observe, let's run the code. You'll say this thing is function. So even you go with function declaration, even you go with function expressions like this, even you go with function expressions, sorry. Even you either go with this function expression or either you go with this function declaration. The say hi is a variable where inside that variable we have this function stored. We have this function stored. That's the one very important thing that everyone should remember, because if you can clearly observe, as we are storing a function inside a say hi variable in both the examples, right? So one very important thing we need to understand is, um, in JavaScript, a function is always a value, so we can deal it with as a value. So the code above is representing in the format of string, but anything is fine. Anything is actually completely fine. So let me take this one more a bit typical example, and I'll say function. No, I think there is this code, right? So we have this basics say hi, this kind of a thing. Let's do one thing. Let func, let me create a variable, and I'll say hi. That's it. Now func off and say hi off. Both yields me the same result. You can see hi and hi. The output for these two respective console log is hi, and this is also for hi. Because see, anyways, it's nothing but this is altogether entire function. We are storing it in a variable named as say hi. So the same function is now being transferred to this given particular, or the same function is now being copied into this new variable known as func. So anyways, this is the same. This is the same. This is the same. Here the function declaration creates the function and put it in a variable known as say hi. But here is interesting thing. This copies it into a variable func. func. Or I repeat, here there are no parentheses. Here this is here there are no parentheses. No parentheses. No parentheses. Right? So now the same function can be called using this say hi, the same function can be called with func variable name also. func variable name also. Right? And one another important thing I just want to mention is, every time, if you can clearly say, I have mentioned that it is very important to have your function specifically having ended with, or any kind of a code that is ending with in JavaScript with a semicolon altogether. But coming back to this given particular thing, for this function declaration, you don't require to mention any kind of a semicolon, but for our respective function expressions like this, by end of the function expression, it is always required. It's a good thing to do, have your respective semicolon present here. Whenever you have a function expression, ending should be with semicolon. If it is a function declaration, it's not that required. It's not that mandatory to have a uh, semicolon. So the answer is very simple, as function expressions are created here in this given particular example as this, as kind of a sort of a variable. So semicolon is recommended. But while function declaration, we are creating functions like a normal uh, standard format of creating a function. So here by the end, semicolon is not required. But here the semicolon is required. The semicolon would be required. So this is what about the function expressions and the function things. Let me copy it. Right. Let's go ahead with this thing known as an callback functions. It's an interesting thing to go ahead with. This is known as callback function. Let's see what is meant by callback functions at this given particular point. Right. So let's see what is meant by a callback function altogether. So to understand what is meant by callback functions, let's look at more examples by passing functions as values using function expressions. Okay. Let's write a simple function. Let me write a simple function. As a function ask, where it accepts two parameters, question s, no. If I'll say, I can say if uh, question, I'll go ahead with s of, else I'll go with no of. No of. Now, if you can see this given particular code, you can clearly see, observe this given particular code. Here we are having some kind of a text. Here we are having some kind of a text. If this condition actually is true, then what we are going to do is we are actually going here and getting this s parameter into a function call, no into a function call altogether. So let me write a few other functions. I'll say function show okay. We'll say console.log agreed. And the function, let's say show cancel. Console.log cancelled the execution, or cancel the execution, or it's denied. Right. So I'll say, I'll call this function and I'll say, are you 18 plus? And I'll pass these two functions. I repeat, these two functions as an arguments. These two functions as an arguments. I'll say show okay, comma, show cancel. Show cancel. So these are the arguments that I'm passing for this respective function. So the question parameter will take this argument, are you 18 plus? The s parameter will take this function show okay. The no parameter will take this function. So let's implement it. If we have this given particular thing known as are you 18 plus? Are you 18 plus? Right? So this is the question that is asked. And when we convert this entire thing into Boolean, it yields the value of true. So it goes here. It goes here. So in the place of s, in the place of s parameter, we are passing the argument to be show okay. So this thing would be show okay of parenthesis. You can clearly observe I'm passing show okay as just a function. I'm not sending this thing like this. I'm not sending this thing like this. I'm not sending this thing like this. I'm passing this entire function, a simple entire function that I have written, as an argument to another function, as an argument to another function. Now here, if you can clearly observe, I have this s with something known as a braces, something known as braces. Similarly for no, it would be something like show cancel, like this. So here we are only sending functions, but these function calling is actually happening inside here. So according to this given particular data that we sent as arguments for this respect to function ask, this condition will be true. So this statement, this function will be executed, which is nothing but here show okay is actually being called, which is nothing but this show okay. This show okay will now be executed, or the content that is present inside the show okay will be executed. So let's check. Sorry. You can clearly see the output is agreed, because once you execute this function show okay, this is the output that you'll see. Similarly, if I send nothing, if I just send an empty string like it, now I can clearly see if I send empty string, here the condition is like this. Here the condition is like this. If of an empty string. If I convert empty string to boolean, it would be 0. So it is false. So this if statement will not be executed. The else statement will be executed. So in the end statement, we have this, which is nothing but we need to execute this given particular function. So if I execute this show cancel function, we have this console log of that will be logged as denied. That's what we are actually seeing on the screen. Now, one very important thing is show OK, show cancel are known as callback functions, are known as callback functions altogether, or other name is callbacks. Other name is callbacks, right? So here the idea is, let me write it. The idea is that we pass a function and expect it to be called back. This is very important thing. Why the function name is callback? Called back later if necessary. If necessary. So in our case, in our respective case, if you can clearly observe, this show OK becomes the callback for this, and show cancel will become a callback for this. So instead of writing it in function declaration, here we can use function. I can say, yeah, we can still use these things instead of writing it as separate functions. I have written this in separate functions, and I have sent this both of them here as separate names. But you can write, instead of writing these two functions in a function declaration format, you can go ahead with and implement it with something known as function expressions. We can go ahead and we can do that thing. Let me do it. Okay, fine. Now one another important thing, let's do one thing. Let's, instead of show OK, let's do this. So let me say ask. I'll say are you 18 plus, and I'll mention it as function console.log. I agreed. Yeah. Function console.log disagreed. Console log disagreed. So here functions are declared inside, instead of having it as, we are declaring functions like this and like this and like this, and we are using names to call it. Here, if you can clearly observe, I am actually calling this, I'm declaring this respect to functions here itself, right? So once, if you can clearly observe, these functions doesn't have any kind of a name. These functions doesn't have any kind of a name. So these are anonymous functions. These both are anonymous functions. Both are anonymous functions. Such functions, these functions are not accessible outside these brackets, outside this thing. We can only be used here itself. Here itself. So these kind of a basic anonymous functions will appear a lot when you're going to go ahead and write and implement a lot of JavaScript code altogether, right? Now coming back to this one thing, let me commit it. I'll say function expression versus function declaration. So what is the primary difference? So I can say function declaration. Yeah. Function declaration is where a function declared as a separate statement in the main code flow. This is what this given particular thing. Function expression is where a function created inside an expression or inside another syntax construct. So for example, we have seen this thing. Where is this example? Right here, if you can clearly observe, this is a function where it is created inside an expression or inside another syntax construct. Here function is created on the right hand side of this given particular equality sign. If we have assignment operator on the right hand side, we have this respective thing, the function that has been created. It has been created. So one very important thing we need to understand is the difference. I think the more subtle difference is created when execution reaches it and is usable only from that moment. Which is nothing but when only function call happens, then only the execution part will start for a respective function body. Once execution flow passes to right side of assignment, right side assessment operator. So I'm talking about this given particular thing known as an function expression. Once this right side of this given particular operator, once this given particular thing entire goes, yeah, let me write it. Where is it? Assignment operator. The function is created and can be used from now on. So this is all about the function expressions. This is all about function expressions. Okay. So the more subtle difference is when function is created by the JavaScript engine. Is when a function is created by JS engine. So I can say a function expression a function expression specifically in this given particular context is created when the execution reaches it and is usable from only from that moment, which is nothing but here, if you can clearly observe this entire thing, this way right hand side, from this given particular point, after the from the right hand side of this assignment operator, once the execution flow passes through the right hand side, the function is created. So once the execution actually happens, okay, let's say hi variable has been created, once after equal to this entire thing, it hits, then only the function will be created. From now on, we can use this given particular thing. That's what about function expressions. But function declarations. Function declarations can be called earlier than it is defined. So function declaration can be called earlier than it is defined, which is nothing but, for example, a global function declaration. A global function declaration. You can say, yeah, is visible in whole script. No matter where it is. Because if you can clearly observe, once you have this given particular global function, it is clearly visible. You can just search it out through separate search tools that are present in the IDE. You can find it. But coming back to these respective, where are these things? These are kind of a bit anonymous and will be stored inside a variable. That's the primary difference. And another thing is all function declarations. Let me write it. It's a very important thing. I'm mentioning all of these things because it's a very important thing. All function declarations are processed. The code is executed. So it has access to these functions. For example, for this part, I can write a simple function. I can say hi. I'll mention something like Nitin, and I can say function say hi, where it takes something known as name, and I'll say console.log. Sorry, I'll say hello name. So if you can clearly observe, function is declared here but called first. Generally this call should be below this, but here it's the reverse case. Let's rerun the code. Now you can clearly see the code still works. The code still works because, as we can clearly see, function declaration can be called earlier than it is defined. So here function definition or declaration had happened, but before this declaration we already called it. But this still works. Why and how? Because one very important thing is a global function declaration is visible in the whole script no matter where it is. This is a global declaration. How can I say this is a global declaration? Because this function is not present inside another function. Because this one single function is not present inside any other curly braces. Like for example, let's assume that we have curly braces, and inside that, let's assume that we have this function. Then in this case, this function is a local function. But here in this case, this entire function is a global function altogether. So once you have this global function, the visibility is very good. Visibility is all over across the things. How this visibility is actually is implemented is because there is some kind of a due to internal algorithms. When JavaScript prepares some kind of a script to run, it first looks global declarations. It creates functions and do some extra things. That's a very internal part. We are not that interested to read about this internal part altogether. Right? So if I try to do the same example, so this I have did it. I try to do the same example. I'll say, let's say hi is equal to, let's do the same example. I'll say console.log. The same thing. Hello. Let me accept the same thing. Let's write this above same code here itself. Now, in this aspect of thing, you'll see an output failure. Say hi is already been declared. Okay. So let's have this code. Right. Now let's see, run the code. Now you'll see. It is clearly mentioning that there is a reference error because cannot access say hi before initialization. So function expressions are created. These are created when there is an execution, like when execution reaches them. Right? This function, specifically this function is reached once it has gone through the execution. But it is not the case here. Which is nothing but the execution happens from top to down, left to right. So initially, if it has say hi Nitin, at this point, the JavaScript interpreter doesn't have context about what is meant by say hi. Because it says say hi is a variable at 85th line, but I'm calling and it is storing some kind of a function, but I'm calling this function in 79th line because while execution is at this point, uh, the say hi variable isn't created and there is no function in it. There is no function stored in it. Okay, that's why you'll see this kind of an error. But if here it for function expressions, to be more precise, for function expressions, wait, but similarly, you have this function declaration. And if you run the code, you'll see this code works because this is a global function. This is a kind of a global function. So that's how the difference between function declaration and function expression actually happens. That's a basic difference between it. The basic difference of a function declaration and function expression altogether. So that's it about the function declaration, function expressions difference. And one other difference is this function declaration is of block scope. So what is meant by this block scope and what is this kind of a thing? We'll come to that given particular point. So let me write it like this. Let's finish this one single line also. Function declaration is or function declaration special feature is their block scope. This is what this respective thing actually meant for. So always remember that this respective thing is always fundamentally a pointer that this is a block scope, which is nothing but the function declaration or the code that is present within the braces will be visible across global part. This code that you are actually seeing on the screen is actually being visible everywhere inside that block, but not outside of it. So if we have this function declaration like these braces, this is present within a code block and it is visible everywhere inside that block. But if you go outside and if you try to ping any kind of a thing from this function, you'll get some kind of a issues altogether. You'll get some kind of an issues altogether. Now let's go ahead and let's try to implement. Let's try to see other type of functions which are known as arrow functions. So for that, let me create a simple file known as arrow functions. So what are arrow functions? So arrow functions is nothing but these are very simple, concise syntax for creating functions. It's often better than function expressions. Now one very important thing, the syntax would be looking like this. I'll say let func is equal to, you will mention the respective arguments. And we have this function expression like this. So this symbol that we are actually seeing equal to greater than, this symbol is known as arrow symbol altogether. So the same function, if I want to write the same above function, give me a minute. Yeah. Now if I write the same function, the above function, I'll simply write it as let func is equal to function arg1 g2 expression. So this entire function expression can be written in one single line like this. So the example would be, we can say let sum is equal to function a comma b, and I'll say return a plus of b. This is pretty straightforward. This is function expression. If I want to write the same thing, I'll say let sum is equal to, sorry, I'll simply mention the arguments. I'll say a comma b. That's how the syntax is. Mention the arguments and mention this symbol. And you mention the expression. Return a plus b. So having parenthesis is good. So instead, you can write it like this. Instead, you can simply write it like this. You can simply write it like this. This is a shorter form. This is a shorter form. So if you can say sum, or yeah, console.log sum 1 comma 2. Execution is same. It's just a syntax. Sorry. Node arrow dot js. I'll see the output. Sorry. So if you can clearly observe the function, whatever that we have written like this, the same thing we are writing it in a shorthand form. We are writing it in a shorthand form. We are following this thing. We mention some arguments or the parameters, and we mention this arrow symbol, and we'll mention the respective function body here. That's it. That's as simple as that. That's as simple as that. Similarly, I can write this code. I'll say let say hi is equal to console log hi. So if I don't want to have create, let's say I'll create a sample thing. Let say hi is equal to function console.log hi. So the above code that you are actually seeing can be written like this. That's it. That's it. You simply call it as say hi, and you can see you have this output as hi. That's how this arrow functions are being actually utilized. So arrow functions can be used as same as this function expressions altogether. I think it's your choice on how do we use it. It's more concise and more easy way of writing a shorthand notations of these functions. So this arrow functions may appear unfamiliar, and initially if you look this given particular arrow functions may not be very readable at first, but this quickly changes as we or your eyes get used to this structure. If your eyes used to get this given particular simple structure, then you prefer to write more of arrow functions. You prefer to write more of arrow functions. That is as simple as that. So we can also write, because it is very single line, this entire, here we have this given particular function in multiple lines. It is very single line. We can also write this code in this multiple line altogether. We can also write that given particular thing. So for example, let's try to have some multi-line arrow functions. I'll say let sum is equals to, sum is equal to a comma b, where I can write it like this. I'll say let result is equal to a plus b, and I'll simply return urn result. I'll simply return result. So this is a multi-line arrow function. Multi-line arrow functions. So this is about the respective thing known as an arrow functions that we have, that we actually use pretty evidently when we go ahead with this respective thing of JavaScript code altogether. So that's it for this respective session. We'll see the next session tomorrow, or in the next session altogether. We'll see other topics. Thank you all.